Hey everybody, welcome to the Sales Leader Council webinar series sponsored by the Sales Collective. My name is Shawn Buxton and I head up sales leadership here at the Sales Collective. I'm happy to be joined today by two of my favorite colleagues, Robin Treasure and Braedi DeLong. And I'm just going to have them introduce themselves, give a little bit of their background and their role at the Sales Collective. So Braedi, let's start with you.
Hmm. Hello, everyone. So my name is Braedi DeLong, and I'm our COO and integrator at the Sales Collective, and have spent a good solid decade of my career trying to help sales organizations develop sustainable revenue models.
And I'm Robin Treasure, and I head up the sales training division at the Sales Collective. And I have a background as an individual contributor, B2B seller, who became a top performer, who then was appointed to mentor other reps on my team. And through that, I discovered how much I love training other reps, helping other reps to do their best. Because of that, I went on to become certified as a sales trainer in gap selling methodology, and then from there I came over to the Sales Collective. So here I am, and really happy to be with everybody today.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. Again, my name is Shawn Buxton. Just to give you a little background about myself, if you don't know me, I've been in sales and sales leadership for 25 years, either as an individual contributor, leading sales teams, or coaching and training sellers and sales leaders. And today we're going to talk about one of the oldest questions of sales leadership lore: top performers or struggling reps, where should you invest your time? The whole purpose of the Sales Leader Council is to get great sales leadership minds together and get different opinions, best practices, maybe even debate a little bit and talk about what's made us successful and what's made you successful as a sales leader and the position you take on some of these very interesting topics. That being said, the chat is open. If you have a question, you're welcome to put your question in the chat. We'll try to get to those, or even a comment. We'll see in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that. But without any further ado, I'd like to get into the discussion with my two guests. So, should sales managers prioritize coaching top performers to maximize revenue, or focus on struggling reps to improve overall team performance? So this is a revenue versus overall team performance question. And I'm gonna throw it to you first, Robin. What say you? Should sales managers prioritize coaching top performers or struggling reps?
Well, the answer to this trick question is a trick answer, which is it all really depends on what your overall objective is and what's going on in the organization today. If the objective is we really need to maximize revenue, we're behind, we really need to maximize revenue, then yes, in the short term, your efforts may be best focused on coaching your top performers so that you can get those quick wins. That also brings the additional benefit of retaining your top talent, because let's remember, just because they're doing well doesn't mean they will continue to be happy and do well if they are being deprioritized or ignored. Those top performers are always hungry to keep getting better and better. And if you don't give them your attention, you are at risk of losing your top talent. So that's one part of the equation. But the other, I believe, is if you have reps who are struggling, it may be incredibly worthwhile to focus your efforts on them. But part of that depends on why is it that they're struggling? Are they struggling because they lack the desire and motivation and positive outlook to actually do the work needed to achieve good outcomes? Or do they have really strong desire and commitment? We can talk a little bit later about exactly what that means. So they've got the strong desire and commitment, but they just don't have the tactical skills because no one has ever taught them Because let's face it, there is no such thing really as sales school or a degree like there are in other disciplines, right? So many reps just simply haven't been taught. They haven't learned the tactical skills necessary. And if you can coach them and empower them with some of those tactical skills, you may see some incredibly quick wins in those struggling bottom performers, let's say. So that would be my take on it. But let's see what Braedi says.
I mean, I say a lot of the same stuff in, I like to break it down in a few stages, right? When we think about the top performers and bottom performers, we're looking at the sales outcome or lagging indicator, right? But then it's around like, okay, well, what is actually leading to the performance, which is everything that you're talking about, Robin, is what is leading to the performance outcome? Are they new in their career and they actually have not been taught a variety of skills and so they're underskilled? Is it that you actually don't have strong onboarding? And so people really aren't getting good in your organization until they hit that 1 or 2 year mark because of the learning curve to learn the business. So your top performers are actually just paralleling longevity, and it's a time frames that is contributing to that performance outcome. There's a lot that comes behind performance. And so when we look at just the lagging indicators and not the leading indicators, that performance can be quite misguided. But when we think about who do we lean on for coaching specifically, I would say who's coachable. That's one of the things that it's my number one for hiring, or at least my top three for hiring, is hiring for people who are coachable. And if you're not coachable, you better be really good out the gate. So who's coachable? Resource management is always hard when you're a manager. You are pulled in a variety of ways, right? So you have to protect your time, but you also have to protect your team. So, and you're constantly in this battle between these two of like, do I protect my time or do I protect my team? So I like to think about what is the leading indicator to the performance rather than just looking at the lagging indicators, which is the outcome itself, and then start to craft what are the things within my control that could be contributing to the performance, and not only using the performance outcome as my true guiding light. And then I make good decisions from there.
One of the things that we talk about in the sales leadership program at Sales Collective is we have this rule of thumb and say there's only two reasons people don't perform at their highest level, and it's a little like provocative by design. I'm sure there's more. There could be like 2.5 reasons, right? But we say two reasons, just kind of get it into two big buckets, and then you kind of start dissecting and drilling down from there. But number one is they don't know how, meaning they don't have the training, the resources, the tools, the support, the coaching. Like they just don't know how to do it with what they have. That is whose responsibility. That's the leader's responsibility to give them all those things, right? But very often what happens when somebody doesn't perform well, the leader looks at them and says, what's wrong with this person? Why are they a bottom performer? Why aren't they a top performer like Robin and Braedi? Like, why are they at the bottom? What's wrong with them? Are they not smart enough? Did I make a bad hire? Right? Versus saying, have I given them everything they need to be successful in this role? And then we can ask them about the second question. Number one, reason they don't perform at their highest level, they don't know how. Number two, reason they don't want to. And then that's where we get into the coachability, the motivation, and all that, which you could have somebody that started off totally just jazzed to be there and totally engaged 100%. And then something happened that disengaged them and changed their amount of want to, and they became, a poor performer or what have you. And we can talk about that if we do a session on motivation in the future here. But I think it's very interesting that the responsibility actually starts with us, not just deciding how we're going to allocate our time, but do we have the right things, as you mentioned, like in onboarding and the training and the preparation? Have we fulfilled our responsibility there, which is a big responsibility? We mentioned, the top performers, spending time with them. And when we think about elite organizations like, professional sports teams or like specific military, like the Navy SEALs, like people that are elite teams, leading elite high performing teams, a lot of it is around the culture of that team and whether you will feel like you belong there or not if you are not meeting that performance standard. So the next question I have for us to talk about is, does spending time with top performers create a self-sustaining team culture, like a message that, hey, this is what it means to be elite. And so hence we think that people will rise to that level or feel so out of place that they'll self-select out? Or does it, risk neglecting those who need guidance the most? And I realize we're not running a military team here, right? It's a sales team, but there are some parallels. I mean, some of us will get killed if we don't make a sale by our manager. Anyway, let me throw that out to you, Braedi.
So, I love like all the trick binary questions because it's like option A, option B, and I always go option C. Um, it's like
I
my
know you will, so that's why.
like option C. So I'll give a little bit of a story. When I was running Fortune 500, we had this top seller that was always the number one on leaderboard, right? Over and over and over and over again, to the point that people would constantly be like, do what he does, do what Jerry does, right? And I made a point to spend time with top performers, mid performers, and bottom performers and make sure that I'm understanding their world. And what was fascinating about making a point to spend time with the top performer is I figured out he wasn't a top performer. Somebody had had so much confidence in him that they actually gave him influence and control over lead distribution. And all of the actual top performer metrics were because he had influence on the deals he cherry picked.
Yeah.
And he
Mm.
wasn't a top performer from a skills perspective. He was a top performer because of his systems, right? The system fed the performance. And so it's very interesting as you think about like, should I spend my time with those who need it the most? Yes and no. You need to also know what is making your top performers successful. And you can't know that if you don't spend time with them. And you can't have healthy skepticism around it if you don't know the ins and outs of their world. So as I look at top performers, I want to know where can they get better so that they continue to perform well and we continue to raise the bar for them. But I also want to understand what's making them successful. Can I repeat that with others? Is there something I can learn from the top performers that I wasn't cognitively aware of? Did they actually create better customer profiling and they have a niche ICP that I should be rolling out to other people? So, spending time with your top performers, if you only focus on the bottom, you're not investing in your successful strategy, which is your top, and you don't know how to replicate fully what they're doing. They might be deploying something you can learn from. Um, so, yeah, you need to spend time with both.
You do. And the other thing that I would add to that too is that everyone needs to feel valued. Every single person on a team needs to feel valued, whether you're a top performer or a bottom performer. And so, we recognize that a sales leader's time needs to be protected and it's limited. And yet, somehow, you have to find a way to invest and show that that team member is valued. And so I know it's a balancing act in terms of time. Like you said, Shawn, protect your time versus protect the team. It's a very subtle balancing act, but yeah, ultimately the team has to feel that they're valued to the point that they see that resources are being invested in them as long as they are coachable, right? So if it's resources that are being thrown at them and they are just not picking it up, well, then that's a different problem, right? But as long as they are receptive, i.e., coachable, like Braedi said, I mean, coachability is so much more valuable than any tactical skill could be.
Mm.
If they aren't coachable, those resources are going to be wasted, right? But as long as they are coachable and receptive, then they will feel valued in having that attention being given to them. And therefore, they will be able to upskill in the areas that they need to upskill. So,
Mhm.
mhm.
Would you say that, because this question is a little different because it's focusing on culture and, the vibe of the team, the expectation of the team, the standard of the team. Is it bad or is it okay? Or is it, C, Braedi? Um, for people to feel pressure as part of a high performance team in sales?
So my brain wants to go immediately to define pressure because I think there is pressure that crushes people and there's pressure that helps people gain momentum and move them forward, right? So there's different types of pressure and effectiveness of pressure. The cultural aspect is you really can't forget that when you're a manager of humans, and this is actually global, this is not unique to sales. When you are a manager of humans, one of your top job responsibilities is retain your talent, like full stop. I don't
Mhm.
care if you're managing engineers. I don't care if you're managing HR. I don't care if you're managing like books, whatever department you are in. When you're a manager of humans, not project manager, manager of the people, right?
Mhm.
One of your core job functions is retain your talent. How are you going to retain your talent if you don't invest or know them?
Mhm.
How are you going to know if they are satisfied in their role? How are you going to know if they're satisfied with their resources? How are you going to know their ideas? There's a lot of things that come in job satisfaction that goes into the cultural aspect that people have to be happy in their roles to be successful. So if they're not happy, but they're a strong seller, they're at a flight risk. And now you're not serving one of your main functions, which is retain your talent.
And part of what will increase that flight risk is if they don't feel valued.
Yep.
So, so yeah, and they've got to be happy. They've got to have the skills. And so, yes, employee retention is paramount because when they leave, of course, we know that the HR expense of replacing that person is very real in terms of dollars and cents. And it's very expensive in terms of losing that knowledge and that know-how and that their relationships that they have with the client base, the skill sets that they developed over time. All of that walks out the door when they leave.
So I want to dig down a level deeper then on this one. So what if I don't mind if they leave? Like let's say, well, I'm saying I'm trying to build a high performance team and I'm just trying to build a team.
Mhm.
I want to build a high performing team. I don't want to just have people here that are just good enough that I can't write them up and get rid of them. I want people that are like high performers. And obviously, I don't want people that are low performers. Unfortunately, the high performers always have options. The low performers are the ones that want to stick around. So
Mhm.
that means because they don't have options.
Mhm.
So that means that if I'm trying to build a high performance team, my concern is that if there isn't pressure there, a social pressure, not necessarily fueled by cruelty or being rude or anything like that, but just like a pressure to perform, just like if you were on a professional sports team, like the Kansas City Chiefs are going to keep me on their roster just because I'm coachable and I'm a nice guy, right, and good looking and all my other qualities I have. They're not just going to keep me for that reason. They're going to want me to actually be a good football player and not just be good but be exceptional.
Mhm.
So what about that kind of pressure? How do you feel about that?
So yeah, like at the end of the day, you have a job and a role in a business and a high performing team. You have to have an accountability line. And Shawn, you and I have talked about this a lot, like with the Trident model of the conflict between like the person and the profit.
Mhm.
And that very much almost competing things where you like the person and the personal side and you want them to have this happy, healthy life. But then that can directly compete with the profit. And when they're not performing, no matter how much you like the person, when they're not performing, you have to start to figure out why are they not performing? Is there something in my control to get them performing that I can address? Like redoing onboarding, investing in training, investing in coaching? Is there something in my control that can unstick the barrier? And then eventually you have to get to the place of, is this worth the resources it's taking, which is starting to lead into the profit, to continue to try to get this performer up, or do I need to try to get this performer out? I think back a few years ago, I had a salesperson wasn't a bottom performer, but wasn't knocking it out of the park. Was kind of remaining in that mediocrity kind of zone, right? And I was in that unsticking motion. I'm like, what is sticking him? What is sticking him, right? He's not doing bad. He's just not that high performer. And I could see that there were barriers. And as we were unpacking the barriers, I eventually figured out he wasn't really fully invested in the want to do zone, that this was truly his number one chosen profession. This was his number two chosen profession. And he had talked himself out of his number one profession, his dream job. And when that came to light, I was like, I don't understand why you're not doing that. And he had told himself that he wasn't capable or smart enough and that he wasn't going. It was all these limiting beliefs. And he wasn't a bad performer, and I was willing to invest the resources into him to get him up. But I made him a deal that I wanted him to reflect on whether or not this is truly where he was going to land and he was going to give up on that number one dream. And if that's truly where the choice he was going to make, I was willing to invest in him. And you know what? He came back and he was like, "You're right. I shouldn't give up my dream." And I was like, "Okay, so we're going to pivot our conversations. We're going to help you transition out, and I'm going to help support you in that dream." And actually, I just saw him this Sunday. His name's Andres, and he came out to Seattle, and we went for a hike together where he celebrated his 2 year mark in his chosen profession, and he's super happy. And so I like to think about the right people, right seats, right tools. That's the
Mhm.
equation that you really want to get to. And you have to decide, are you going to unstick this person and invest the resources? Are you going to help them get into the right seat? In this case, that's an example of he needed to get into the right seat and he needed help understanding what that seat was. And these are part of the difficult parts of human management. It is very hard to uncover what is hanging somebody up. You know,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see a third option to the two that you just gave that happens a lot with sales leaders is, or am I just going to let them float along because I don't want to be mean, right? Or
Mhm.
I don't want to fire them. They're not bad enough to fire. I mean, they haven't done anything like that's so wrong that we should just fire them. But I don't, I see a lot of that kicking the can down the road from managers. And when we do our exercise in the Trident, where we were building a vision statement as to what you want your team to be, nobody says, I want to be the number two team. I want to be the number three team. Everyone says, I want to be number one. But when it comes to having the hard conversations and the hard work, the practice and the coaching and all that stuff to be number one, that's where they kind of don't really have the stomach for it. And so I think it's a healthy balance is important. That's to your point. That's why we talk about the profit and the person. I think the majority of people that I run into now, maybe it's a small majority, but a lot of people are naturally inclined to do the people side, the person side, hey, I'm managing and leading people that are unique individuals, talents, abilities, fears, insecurities, all those things. And sometimes at the detriment to the business, which is the profit side, which is, yes, they are a nice dude, but they are not cutting the mustard. We've coached them, we get them all the tools and resources they need. They're not a top performer. You're not challenging them to be a top performer because you're more concerned about them being your buddy. And so that's something that we find a lot in the Trident. Final thoughts on that, Robin?
Yeah, I would add two things. One is, yes, it's doing a disservice to the business to keep that person just kind of coasting along, not doing great, not reaching their potential. But it also does a disservice to that person. And Braedi, the example that Braedi gave, that was a very courageous and honest conversation that drove at what was going to ultimately make that rep happy. And he wasn't living his best life. He was living his number two desire, not his number one. And by having that open and honest conversation, that was an incredible service to him that, yes, actually led to him leaving that position, but resulted in something exponentially more fulfilling, and just better alignment for the organization and for him ultimately. So I would say that those honest conversations are what drive to real value. So that's one thing I would add. The other thing that I would add, going back to this core question of like, spending time with top performers, are we creating a culture of positive pressure? Maybe that's kind of what you were getting at too, right, Shawn, with the positive pressure. What I would say is, I would liken this very much to, okay, extreme pressure in the natural world will turn a coal into a diamond. Okay, extreme pressure will turn coal into a real diamond. In a sales culture, extreme pressure will usually just make people break and fold under pressure, and it usually doesn't create an actual positive pressure culture. Instead, if it's coming from within, which is that rep's own motivation, what is it that drives them to excel? If you can tap into that and work with the rep on that, you will see them flourish even more. And I believe that that's the kind of culture you want to create. And with the sales DNA assessment that we utilize, we have insight into what type of motivation does the seller have? Are they intrinsically driven, meaning that they just love becoming a master of sales? They love the feeling of achievement from being their best? Or are they extrinsically motivated, meaning that they really love those fat commission checks and the rewards trips, etc., right? Tapping into whatever it is that makes that person thrive and grow from within is, I believe, the best way to create that positive culture.
Yeah, I agree with you in that regard. Great. Well, since I feel like this question on the surface, it seems very, like you said, a little binary, I do want to continue to dig into the subtleties and some of the things that come up when we start actually applying this to teams. So my next question is going to sound a lot like the other questions, but there's a key word that I want to discuss in regards to our conundrum today. So should sales managers allocate equal time to all reps? Okay, we've already talked about that. But regardless of performance, and why are we doing it? To ensure fairness.
Mm.
The F word.
I have strong feelings on this topic.
I do too. So who wants to go first? Go ahead. Go ahead, Braedi. Let it out.
So I don't know where this idea of fairness started in business, right? Like this, if I have to treat everybody the same so that I'm not creating some sort of an unfair environment. People are complex. We need different things. We are not the same. So treating everybody equal is actually not fair. One of my favorite books on this planet is The End of Average. I have probably read it cover to cover like 4 times. And it's The End of Average is talking about that the average, when we make decisions against the average, it's good for comparing groups, right? So if you want to compare a group of a set to another group of a set, the average can help you in a group comparison. The moment you need to make decisions about the individual, the average is useless. And the greatest example of this is when the US military started their fighter pilot program. They did this massive research study trying to measure the average man. They measured like 1,000 men, because mind you, this is early 1900s. The idea that women could be fighter pilots wasn't really quite a thing yet. So they only measured the average man. And they kept crashing. They built the cockpit to the average man, and the pilots kept crashing. And they kept thinking, we need to train more, we need to train more, we need to train more. And one person finally took a moment to say, how many people actually fit the average man? And they looked at their fighter pilots to see how many people actually were close to that average, and the answer was 0. Nobody fit the average. And because they built the cockpit for the average, they built the cockpit for no one. Like nobody has the same reach. And so they were crashing because of response time. So when you get in your car today and you can adjust your seat height and forward and backward and telescoping and all those things, they hadn't learned that lesson. It was this exact moment in time that they learned that the controls need to be tailored to the individual. And if you take that concept and you reapply it to this concept of fairness, fairness is the average in disguise.
Mhm.
So if
Mm.
you try to be fair and you try to go coach and lead to the average, just like the military learned, you're coaching and leading no one.
Exactly. And you're going to have different styles in your team, different way. People want to be coached in different ways. You may have your lone wolf who just wants to go out and do their own thing. And yes, you need to give them some attention and let them know you care, they are valued, you want to keep helping them, but you've got to also follow their cues that they are a lone wolf. And you dedicating the same amount of time to them as someone else in the interest of fairness, it doesn't really serve anyone.
What about in regards to perks? And I'll tell you where I'm going with this. So since we're talking about fairness now, and I really like what both of you said about it, I don't really believe that fairness exists in sales. Because it's an individualized concept. What's
Mhm.
fair to Robin and what's fair to me and what's fair to Braedi is largely based on what's good for Robin, me, and Braedi individually. For example, if Robin is a top performer and every Friday, and she's like, let's say she's 150% of her number consistently. Every Friday, Robin wants to head out early and go golfing. And then Brady's my boss, and I'm on the team. And boy, I'd like to go golfing too. However, I'm like at 80% of my number, and I'm tracking to hit 80% of my number for the year, or whatever. I'm not a top performer. Maybe I'm middle of the road. And I said to Brady, hey, I'd like to, I think I'm gonna go play some golf this Friday. Brady says, I don't know if that's a great idea, because it's the end of the quarter and look at your numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, that's not fair. Robin gets to go. She goes every Friday. Um, to me, I'm right. That's not fair for me, right? But if you'd ask Robin, is that fair for you to go golfing every Friday? She would say, yeah, absolutely. I've earned it. And so I think a lot of sales leaders, whether they're allocating their time, they're allocating privileges, perks, resources, whatever, to top performers versus struggling reps, get caught in this trap where they want to be fair. And what it actually does is discourages high performance.
Mhm.
Because I believe if I've got a team and I've got two high performers, I believe those two high performers actually should be treated differently. I think they should get special treatment. I think they should get extra time if they want it, or extra alone time if they want it, to your point, Robin. And like, yeah, you are a top performer, you get the big piece of chicken, right? Like you get the advantages, you get the stuff that you want. And if you're a bottom performer, then that means you've got more work to do. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or I'm going to treat you poorly. It just means that you're not going to necessarily get all the perks and the niceties. If in my analogy, Shawn came to Braedi and said, hey, this isn't fair. Braedi, if she was in my leadership program, I'd coach Braedi to say, you're right, it's not fair, but what I will promise you, and I would have her explain that because fairness is an individualized concept. What I will promise you, though, is if you rise to that level of performance, you too can go play golf every Friday. Like the opportunity and treatment is the same based on the standard by which we measure greatness or high performance here. As soon as you start doing that consistently, you can go do whatever you want on Friday afternoon. I don't care. But if you're not tracking for that, then yeah, you need to be here working on your business. What do you all think of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the concept of fairness can be detrimental to everybody despite its best intentions. And perks are to be earned, not assumed, and not automatic. So, just finding a way as a sales leader to understand what motivates a team member and then work with them on that so that that motivation serves as the fuel for them to get the outcome that you want to see for the organization and that they want to see for themselves as an individual.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's
So,
it, it's a never-ending struggle, right, for that sales manager. They're constantly trying to figure out how to do it, and you can never win. when you're trying to be fair to everybody. Braedi, you're going to say something. Sorry about that.
I was just going to say that there's a lot of people in the world that don't really understand the difference between a time boxed profession and a performance boxed profession. And a lot of times they try to merge them together because as a society, we've all put a pin that like approximately 40 hours a week is full time, or at least in the US. In other countries, it changes. But there's time box professions and there's performance box professions. And while we do our best to comply with certain time box constraints and not have like an abusive time in either direction, right? Not an employee abuse in the under, not a business abuse in the over. Sales is a performance boxed profession. Right. So a time boxed profession would be like a retail store where there are opening hours and closing hours, and you have to be there. That is a time boxed profession. There are other time boxed professions like in manufacturing, right? Performance boxed professions, they can have variability in the time because it is really a performance box professions. And so when people start doing this fairness debate, trying to pretend like they're in a time boxed profession and not a performance boxed profession, it's one of the fastest paths for me to bite your face off. I'm not in the business of pretending that we're in something we're not in. And
Exactly. And it does also go back to the question of leading versus lagging indicators, which you brought up earlier, Braedi. It's like, so if this bottom performer isn't getting the performance results that we want to see, then we do look at, okay, well, what are at least the leading indicators? If they've been going to bat a million times, they've been picking up the phone, making the cold calls, doing all of the activity, even if it's ineffective, so that's a sign that we need to support them and work with them, then at least we know that they're going in the right direction, right? And so when we talk about being fair, which I think we all agree, we just kind of throw that out the window, but at least we see that the activity is there as the leading indicator, even if the lagging indicator performance isn't quite up to par. So we take that into consideration as well.
Mhm.
At the heart of a lot of this discussion today is the sales manager making a judgment call on an individual, right? Saying, this person is worth investing my time in. This person needs more time. This person had an opportunity to get my time. They blew it, so they don't get any more of my time, right? All these different judgment calls we're making. So I would be remiss, I should say, if we didn't talk about the P word. So we talked about the F word, fairness, and now I want to talk about the P word, potential. So I'm just basically using the same question over and over, just slipping in the words that I like to talk about. Should sales managers prioritize time with reps based on their potential then? So if we're not gonna, it's not about fairness, we've established that. But what if they got a lot of potential? Shouldn't I be spending more time with people with high potential? And the people that are deemed low potential, shouldn't I cut bait with them and move on?
Potential is a very subjective word, right? Potential would be that sales leader's subjective assessment of what they believe the rep can do, which may or may not happen and may or may not be true. And it's just like marrying someone on potential because they could become a great person, right? So the potential can be a little tricky. What instead can be much more fruitful and beneficial is if you've got a more objective assessment of where does this rep need help and where are they lacking in a way that we really cannot help them. And so, I've mentioned a couple of times the sales DNA assessment. I can't help it because it is such a wonderful tool to use to objectively measure what's going on with a rep. We know that the one bucket of competencies that we test for is the will to sell, their desire, their outlook, their commitment, which I mentioned earlier. If those things are lacking, it doesn't matter what potential we think they might have to improve. they don't have the raw material to work with in terms of their own desire. We can't make them have it, no matter how much we invest, right? But if we see that a rep has the will and the commitment and the positive outlook, and they're just lacking in those tactical skills, then yes, that potential, to use the P word, they could potentially become a great rep. But now we know more objectively in what way, in what do we need to do in order to move them up.
Mhm.
Braedi, you want to go?
I was waiting if you were going to say Braedi or if you were going to reply to her at the end.
Well,
So,
I actually, I would like to hear your response and Robin's response to mine, to
Okay.
my take, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
because I think I have a unique take. It dovetails from Robin's, but one of the things we talk about in the sales leadership program that people kind of are surprised about is that I think it's a waste of time. And the top leaders, more importantly, what I think, top sales leaders I've worked with throughout my career don't bother trying to measure or evaluate someone's potential because it's unmeasurable. You can't do it. I don't care who you are, you can't quantify someone's potential. Uh, and HR insists on doing this ridiculous exercise with sales once a year to make themselves look important and valuable, called the 9 box exercise, where they have, one axis is performance, which is very measurable, and the other is potential. And then what you do is you get all the leaders around and you have somebody that was like, yeah, I really like Shawn. He's got a lot of potential. And, we had a bunch of drinks at the last sales conference. I think he's a great guy. So yeah, he's high potential. And then you got, somebody else that had a bad experience with me, thinks I have low potential, amazingly enough, because they don't really work with me very much, and they just had this one bad experience. And then what you end up doing is just debating. Everyone's debating over their gut feeling, and then we ultimately just land in the middle somewhere to compromise. And then we do nothing with this whole exercise anyway. Like, or worse yet, we put that in their file as Shawn's low to mid potential. Now, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Nobody knows. In fact, Shawn doesn't really know unless you put a gun to his head what he's capable of doing, right? Depending on life circumstances, we've all surprised ourselves what we'll be willing to do or not do. And so I actually teach our leaders that you're really wasting your time. Instead of measuring potential and performance, why not measure activity and performance? Because we can observe activity. I can observe how many dials you made, how many meetings you booked, how many X you did when during this time frame. And that's usually a direct reflection of your level of engagement and attitude, the quality of your attitude, and probably coachability at times too, your level of activity. Activity traditionally goes down when the attitude starts to drop. So on one axis, we have attitude, the other axis, we have performance. And that gives us a much clearer indicator of, is this person, do they have what I consider momentum? Meaning, are they trying and are they having success? And if that person is trying and has success, I want to keep throwing gas on that fire and give them the opportunity to continue to run as fast as they can run, rather than saying, you know what, I think they've maxed out their potential at age 42. This is as good as it gets for them. They'll never be any better. And it's last thing I'll say is a really arrogant, actually, position to take, because you're assuming that you are the world's best sales leader that's ever walked the planet, and that if they didn't go work for Braedi or Robin on their sales team, that they wouldn't be even better. So the fact that somebody doesn't perform under your leadership might be a reflection of your leadership, not a reflection of their potential. But I will yield the rest of my time to Braedi for any counter arguments you may or may not have.
so not necessarily counter arguments. I think through the same concept with different words. Um, I when it comes to management, I focus a lot on the choices we make, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of choice, right? There's choices. Most people have the potential to do the things they choose, but that's not our issue. We make choices. And it's why, knock on wood, I have a pretty good track record of having almost no friction when I let people go. Because when I let people go and I finally say, hey, we're at the end of the road, I'm not willing to continue to invest my resources in you, We focus on the choices that led us there.
Mm.
Right? That's what we do. We focus on the choices. And it's that old expression, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? And when I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I'm no longer willing, right? I'm now setting the boundary. I'm not willing to invest any more resources in you, which is time, effort, energy, money, all of it, right? All of those resources that you draw because of the choices. And you chose this path. And when we will have had many conversations around those choices leading up to it before we finally say, okay, it's your choices have got us here. I'm setting this boundary, right? You're out, and we're going to talk through the choices that got us to this place. Almost every single person that I have ever released from their role, I still talk to this day. Like most of us are actually still friends. And they thanked me for everything I invested in them leading up to that point because we focus on the choices. And you're using the word activity. I use the word choices because there's other choices beyond sales activity, and I don't want to conflate them,
Mm.
right? The
Good
the
point.
ch- the choice to set yourself up for success because you're sleeping. Well, guess what? Like I've had to fire somebody because their hobby was a gamer and they were gaming until 3 o'clock in the morning and they couldn't seem to stop the choice to game until
Mm.
3 a.m. And so every day they showed up with 4 hours of sleep and they weren't successful. It has nothing to do with sales activity. It has a lot to do with choices,
Mm.
right? So I don't like to mix those two.
Mhm.
And I don't like to treat people like children. You're an adult and you're in a profession and you're accountable to your choices. And I'm not going to make your choices for you. But I am here to hold the boundary when your choices negatively impact this organization. So I don't think as much about potential because most of us have the potential, right? Like I have the potential to be the world's greatest runner if I made choices around it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
I love that. I love that distinction. I love, yeah, choices in terms of like what behaviors are they choosing to engage in, right? So that will have a huge outcome on who they are as a person and then how they show up professionally. The other thing that I would add too is that when it comes to activity, we use the word a lot in sales activities. I actually like to use the word action because action implies more intention, critical thinking, and thought. And so if you have a rep who, even if they're not getting the greatest outcome, but if the actions that they take have intention, they've thought it out, there's a strategy behind it, that shows that will help to understand what results they might expect to achieve in the future versus someone who is mindlessly engaging in activities just to check a box, right?
Yeah.
So there, I guess I would add that extra layer of definition as well.
I love that. And I'm adding both of those to the Trident program because I think they're very insightful. I love the distinction and the semantics of it all, right? Because they do have unique meanings that are important to call out. So thank you for doing that. Well, folks, here we are once again. We have solved all the sales leadership problems in the world in only 45 minutes. So you're welcome. Uh, we are available to work with you one-on-one if you want to work with Robin and have your sales team be under her coaching and training and have the awesome experience of access to all her knowledge, then that's something you can do. If you want to work with me and help you raise your sales leadership game to the next level and work with you as a sales manager, I'm also on the delivery team along with Robin. So just go to thesalescollective.com, where you can also find a bunch of resources. Maybe you don't want to work with me. I can understand that. And you just want some resources. You can go there and check out our YouTube channel as well as all of our blogs. We have a lot of free content for you there. But I'd like to say thank you to my two panelists today. Awesome input as always. Thank you for Brian, the man behind the scenes that's running everything. And thank you to all of you that attended the webinar. We will see you again next month when we do this again. This has been the Sales Leader Council, sponsored by the Sales Collective. We'll see you next time.